Everybody, what up, though? Welcome to the iPhone I podcast. I'm your man, Mo Riley, aka Mr. Act Like It. And today I have my brother with me, Mr. Brooklyn Taylor. Brooklyn, say what up, though.
Greetings. Glad to be here.
Hey, yeah, man. It's been a minute. It's been a minute, King, since we chopped it up. Last time we chopped it up for a good amount of time, and we got some gems, man. How you feeling?
We always do. I'm feeling great, man. How you doing?
Hey, man, I'm living the dream, as they say. You think about it when you were a kid, you know what I'm saying? You always had a dream of what your life would be. I think about mine. I had a pretty simple dream as a kid, man. All I wanted to do was be married, have a family, own a house, have a couple of cars, and be able to travel every now and again. Now, I've been all over the world. I'm married. You know, I got two kids, three that I take care of. Got a nice house, got two SUVs out in the driveway and in the garage, got my own garden in the back. And I'm a city boy, you know, grew up in the concrete jungle just like everybody else, man. I never would have thought it would have been like this. I knew I could get there, just didn't think it would be like this. How about you, man?
Amen. Yeah, it's amazing to visualize where you want to be and what you want to do, and then get there in real time, and then get there and get there again, so to speak, and just keep adulting. And it's a blessing. It's a blessing to still be here.
100. Yeah, man. With all the great things going on in my world and other things, man. You know, one thing that kind of bothers me. Not necessarily bothers me, but it just has me thinking, man. You know, like I just talked about being a parent and parenting and whatnot. And I remember, you know, I was at Terry's school, right? And her and I are sitting there talking. And then this young lady just walks up rudely, acts like I'm not even there, starts talking to Terry, just like cut us off, jumped in between us, started talking to Terry as if I wasn't there, man. And I was just sitting there like, yo, you know what we always ask? Do you have any home training? Which got me to thinking about some stuff, man. Like, nowadays, what do we really teach our kids, man? Are we teaching them soft skills that'll make them beautiful, better human beings? Are we teaching them things that'll make them successful in life? And after my experience, with her being in high school, I'm starting to realize that as a whole, as a society, especially with this new administration and everything else going on, that we really aren't giving our kids the essentials for success. And I'm disappointed by that, man. And I just want to get get an idea from you, or get an understanding from you. What do you think the cause is, and what do you think a remedy would be? Because I got mine, but I'm curious to hear what your opinion is on this.
This reminds me of something. Let me see here. I'm looking for, I was looking for the definition of average person. The average person, an average person or thing is typical or normal. The average adult man burns 1,500 to 2,000 calories per day. Synonyms: usual, common, standard, general. So where I was going with that is, George Carlin once said, think about the fact that the average person is stupid. And then think about the fact that the average person, there's many more people below average, right? So if your average parent is not teaching the basics, right? What the little girl did when you were talking to Terry, that's below average parenting. In fact, that's abysmal parenting, because I know a lot of children that would never, right? Like, we were taught when I was a kid, my siblings and I, we would never interrupt adults. If adults were in the living room all having a conversation, unless the kitchen was on fire, we weren't. You know what I'm saying? We were not going to interrupt that. So and that's why, and I'm sure you grew up the same way. So that's why it's jarring to see that happening, because you're expecting excuse me, I'm sorry. Can I say something to Terry? Terry,
Right. Or
did
just
you do
say hi. Like, hi, Mr. You know,
anything? An acknowledgement, like
anything.
the fact that kids to see an adult and not even acknowledge, right? And in the context, you are in her school, right? So it would be weird enough if you were like out checking the mail, standing next to Terry, and the girl rode up on a bicycle and started talking to her without acknowledging you. That would be
Right.
weird. But in the setting of a school where there's, by definition, comparatively few adults, one teacher to 20 or 30 kids in a classroom, one principal, assistant principal. Like, there are so few adults that if you're in the hallway, you can see where the adults are, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So I think it is definitely a failure of parenting, because that's whose responsibility it is to, people do contrary things to their parenting every day, all the time.
Right.
But that behavior shows me that she wasn't even taught to not, to she's just dodging in between a man and his daughter and just doesn't even acknowledge. She doesn't see what was wrong, right?
Right.
And so
Right.
that's a training issue.
Well, here's the thing. It could be two things, because it could be two things. It could be one, that she wasn't taught, or it's two, she decided to ignore the teaching, which in this case, you will never know, because when we were growing up, one of the best things about growing up back in us old folks grew up in the 1900s is, these teenagers that asked me and told me, one thing about growing up is that it was, in fact, a village. So if one person caught you doing something wrong, there was another adult there who could be charged with ensuring that you stayed in line and did things right. Now, me, nowadays, as an auxiliary parent or as the quote unquote village, we no longer have the right to even correct kids anymore like we used to. You know what I'm saying? If we caught y'all in the gas station stealing, we would get, parents would be like, look, y'all better get right, or I'm going to whoop y'all butt, or whatever the case may be, and tell your mama. You know what I'm saying?
And you had the authority to do it.
And you had the authority to do it, So, well, let's back up a little bit, man. I've been thinking about this, and we've talked about this before. What exactly is parenting? You know what I'm saying? And I'm starting to realize more and more. I know what Webster's dictionary says it is, but to me, parenting really is programming.
Parenting is programming.
Yeah.
Write that down. Write that down. There's nobody here.
Yeah. But parenting really is programming. It's giving enough information to a child, be it about any scene or situation, with the hope that they'll react in a positive way when the situation arises. Why do we tell our kids to clean our room? Because we have to worry about infection. We have to worry about insects. We have to worry about all of these different things. But nowadays, we just tell our kids to clean our room. We don't explain to them anything. We don't tell them why it's important. Why this is just as important as taking a shower. We really don't spend a lot of time teaching and programming our kids. And when we look in the past, we see that I think about the successful people in the world, because that's what we're all trying to emulate, right? We all want to either be rich, or we want to be famous, or we want to be both, or we want to be deemed successful, and I'm starting to realize that the most successful people, I'll say the majority of successful people, usually came through positive programming.
Effective programming.
Effective,
right?
like
there was almost nothing positive about the way the Jacksons were raised, but man, was that effective in making billions of dollars worth of music and performances, and right.
And
but
when they had the option to leave it alone, and that's why today's cliche, or at least one that I'm thinking about, is train up a child. Because the reason why it's so important is that just like the Bible says, if you train up a child, and I'm not being religious when I'm saying that, I get a lot of wisdom out of the Bible. I don't really use it for, these spiritual gain as much anymore. But it does teach me lessons because lessons can be timeless. And lessons, it doesn't matter what era you're in, a good lesson is a good lesson. You know what I
Amen.
mean? So,
For sure.
yeah, so, training up a child, it says that when you train up a child in the way they should go, when they become old, they will not depart from it, you know? So imagine teaching your kid how to be, or spending enough time with them so that they can learn to be responsible on their own. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Imagine if we taught them that, you know, how effective they would be when they actually hit the real world and they're able to function. And we've given them practice, you know?
But that's the gig, isn't it? Like that's the job
That's
to teach
supposed to
them.
be the gig, but I feel like the gig has changed and I'm trying to find out why it's changed. It used to be we teach them stuff so that they can go out in the world and be functional adults. But if you want them to be more than functional, then you have to give more. And in that a cliche that we use, that if you want something you've never had, you usually got to do something you've never done. So if we
Always.
get them with the mindset that I'm going to have to exert more than the average effort to get something, you hope that eventually they'll find it. Like my parents, they made me independent. I had been pretty much independent since I was probably like 13 or 14. You
Were
know,
they
then
trying
I
to? Or
was
was
I
it just
trying
a
to?
result of the
Absolutely not.
condition?
It was a
Okay.
result of the programming. My dad worked second shift, so he wasn't around. So you know what he told me? Take care of your mama and your sisters while I'm not in the house. Protect them. This is where my gun is, because he had a 21 gauge shotgun. This is where it's at. Make sure you lock all the doors at night. Make sure, if anybody messes with your mother or your sister, that you do your best to protect them. I'm not expecting you to be me, but just use what you got for that particular result.
Right.
So I became an adult who did that. My dad worked, my mom didn't. It's only natural that it's likely that I would be, eventually be married and my wife not work. That's why I bust my butt to get into the trade that I'm in so that she wouldn't have to do it, because that's what I was taught. We all programmed with a certain mindset of everything. And so I think we need to be, as parents and as adults within society, I think we do have to be more intentional about the message that we give our kids. Because right now they only learning them from the tablets, from the movies, and from
Mhm.
reality shows, unfortunately. Because we got to get our time by ourselves too, because the world's taken from us. So we really, when you have a baby, and this is why I don't like, this is one of the drawbacks to having a child really, really, really young, is that you really don't get to hone your own skills to the extent to where you can teach somebody something, because you're trying to learn on the fly. You know what I mean? So I would always encourage, like me, I've mentored young men and I've always told them, and I told them something you told me. You always said, don't lay down with a woman unless you're okay with her having your baby, you know?
Mhm.
And not only that, but you also said, don't ever be with a woman that you wouldn't mind having at your mama's funeral. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And those have been principles that I've lived by in my dating life, and everything else, that I will not marry somebody unless I'm okay with them being with me at my mama's funeral. Because that usually means that they're going to be there for me, you know?
Yeah.
And
For
that
sure.
type of programming has caused me to live a better than average life or have a better than average existence. And it's also made me far more useful to the world than
Mhm.
some people that we've come across in our lifetimes. And I just think that we need to really do that, and or maybe become conscious of it, because I don't think we're really conscious. I think we spend most of our time just kind of reacting to situations rather than being proactive. You feel me? And I find myself just sitting there like, okay, like when I talk to Terry, I'm always saying, think about it, you know, stop,
Yeah.
think about it, figure it out, do it, and then she figures it out. And that's one of them proud daddy moments, you know what I mean? So,
Right.
what do you think
And
programming,
that
parenting and programming?
Well, that kind of thing. This is what I remember about being, young adulting, right? Like being back when we were in the Marine Corps in 18, 19, 20, 21, right? When when things got challenging and when it seemed like this would be a good time to do what a young Marine can do, right? To use force, to use violence, to do whatever. The
Mm-hmm.
programming part is to think about what your parents are going to go through if you take things too far, or what your parents have said. When you watch a movie like you know sometimes the person is there. You watch a movie and someone's like the spirit, like the spirit of Mufasa talks to Simba or something, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
like um King T'Challa going back, and into the purple realm, whatever, and talking to his father, King T'Chaka, and him giving him advice, or him debating with him, or whatever. Or Black Panther again, and T'Challa's fighting, and his mom, the queen, is like, show them who you are, or remember who you are, right? That's what it's like. Proper parenting is arming your child or your children so that when
Mm-hmm.
they're out in the world, right? Let's say you have a daughter, she's out in the world, but fortunately for her, she has a dad, and the dad is you, right?
Right.
And she's out, and her homegirls are like, let's go with these guys we just met and get in this van and go to their hotel. And she's like, what do I look like, Natalie Holloway? My dad taught me never to get in a car with people who I just met, or never put
Right.
myself in a position to where if these people steal our phones, or these people, we could go around the corner and get stuck up. Like, your job is to like impart that security. Like, hey, if I'm not with you, then you need to know how to protect yourself, and this is how you protect yourself. Because protecting
Right.
yourself is a 24/7 thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you're on your job and you're like, listen, I'm training you because I can't be with you 24/7, 365. So you need to use your brain and be like, you know what? Even if the cool kids are doing this, the cool kids die all the time, right?
All day
Cool
long.
kids drive drunk. They're not good drivers, and they're too young to be drinking, but cool kids wrap their parents' cars or somebody's car around poles all the time, right? So,
Unfortunately, yeah.
unfortunately. So, but when you're like, when you're like, Doughboy, let me out the car. When you're like, I'm not driving
That
with
is a
these.
perfect doggone scenario right there.
You're like, no,
Furious taught Trey something that Doughboy and Chris weren't taught.
they didn't have fathers.
They didn't have fathers.
They didn't have fathers.
He even told him before he left, he said, I'm sorry about what happened to your friend, but you are my son. You know?
Right.
I'm sure Doughboy didn't get that speech. As a matter of fact, if you remember, Doughboy got in a fight with Ricky, and Mama attacked Doughboy, and what nobody defending Doughboy at the time when they were fighting in the yard. So you're right, man.
Yeah.
And
And
it's
and in
so
the song, in the clip song, Birds Don't Sing, Malice mentions how, how he shared his dad with his friends because they didn't have dads.
Yep.
Him and his brother had a dad, and
Yep.
his dad took them on fishing trips. He's like, damn, I had a dad. Like, and to me, that whole song is very moving, but that was like, his dad was so good that he was like, I'm going to raise my sons, and I'm also going to give my son's friends the benefit because they're all out there in the world, right?
Yep.
Furious was kind of like, I can't even help all these other kids. I'm going to help Trey, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he might have done well to actually help all the other kids, right? And be like, this world that we're living in, you need help even if your dad's not around. I mean, and look, man.
He even did it though. You remember when he told him to meet him in Compton? It was Ricky, and then all them other people came around, and he was explaining gentrification.
He
In a
did.
way,
Well, were
he
Ricky's friends
was
there?
being. Well,
Or
if
was
you
that just the
remember,
neighborhood? Because a
it
lot
was
of
Trey and
neighborhood
Ricky.
people came.
It was Trey and Ricky. Because remember they hopped in Trey's
Oh,
car
okay. So Trey and
and
Ricky was
went
there.
with
Okay.
Ricky, and that's when they were there. Because remember they were driving back, and Ricky was like, "Damn, man, your dad deep." You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm sure Ricky took that information just like Trey took it. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Also, another aspect of that movie, which I'm glad you brought it up, man, because remember he lied to his dad that he wasn't a virgin because the number one thing was in his house. His daddy said, "I ain't want no grandbabies."
Right.
So he made sure. As a matter of fact, he was still a virgin. All the way up until that point because he understood that I didn't want to disappoint dad.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And that's the type of programming we really need to get back to. We don't need to demand a lot of our kids. We just need to give them the information and reinforce the positive actions with good things and make sure that we explain the difference between a positive action and usually a positive action and a negative action usually is the result in our eyes. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But at least gives them an opportunity to learn about cause and effect. That if you do this likely could happen. We giving our land away cheap, or we're allowing them to come in and devalue the land that we have. But understand that when you do that and you try to sell it, they're gonna buy it from you for the cheap, but then they're gonna raise the prices when you leave. You know what I'm saying? So imagine Trey growing up later, going off to Morehouse like he did, and then eventually deciding to buy a house. You don't think that stuck with him?
Yeah, definitely. So it was super beneficial. The reason, literally, like to bring it full circle, the reason he survived the movie, and then in the after the wording afterwards, it shows that he went on to go to the school and everything. The reason he survived the movie is because what I spoke about earlier when I was in the Marine Corps, that voice, your mom and dad's voice in your head saying, you're not this guy. You can't be in this car going to avenge Ricky's death, even though what happened to Ricky is messed up. This only ends with you ruining your life, right? Because you either successfully kill those guys who killed your friend and end up in prison,
like Doughboy.
or like no,
Doughboy
died.
Yeah, 2 weeks later.
Got killed. A week later, right? Died. So it's only going to end two ways. You're either going to get killed trying to kill them, you're going to get killed after you kill them, or you're going to prison for killing them. You going to college and living happily ever after isn't really one of the options. I'm sure someone has done it, but I think 90% of the time it's not going to end well, right? So that only comes from the only person in the car who had two functioning parents, even though they were divorced, right? His mom and his dad. You had Lawrence Fishburne's character and Angela Bassett's character. She had the wherewithal to be like, look, I've done all I can. He's a teenager now. I can't make him a man. You're his father. He's going to live with you now. You're the captain now. And it all worked out for the best because she had the emotional intelligence to let him go, which some mothers wouldn't. And the father had the intelligence to be like, okay, I know what I'm doing. I got this from here. I'm going to make sure my son is, disciplined and smart and independent, and and all the things, right?
Yeah.
And regardless of his, some things in life are luck, right? I watched a video earlier today, and it was in District Heights, Maryland. It was a 23-year-old woman. There's video from a gas station, right? And her and her friend, or maybe her cousin, maybe her sister. There are two women inside this white car, and it's parked in front of the gas station. There are three men on the right side of the car. They're just hanging out. They're teenagers. And there were like two other men on the other side of the car. It's the simple scenario. You go to the gas station, you get something to drink, you're in the car talking. These guys are teenagers, and for whatever reason, some teenagers like to hang out at gas stations. They're hanging out at the gas station, and then you see in the video, you don't even see which car it comes from. Someone does it. Someone drives by and starts shooting, right? And you see and it hits the driver's side of the car, and it hits one of the boys that are standing on the right side of the car. And so the boy that gets hit comes around, and he seems like he's shot in the leg or something. The woman in the driver's side, she hops out, and she's just screaming and freaking out. And then you see the woman in the passenger side slumped over. 23-year-old young lady. She ended up dying later at the hospital. And the thing is, it was just a split-second thing. Except when I was watching the video, I was thinking to myself, your dad would tell you not to hang out there. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you or I were to roll into that scenario, like just roll up to that gas station, we'd be like, nah, we're gonna go get gas somewhere else, or we're gonna, or we're not gonna tarry, we're not gonna lollygag around here, right? Because it just seemed, now it could happen almost anywhere, like a school shooting or a mass shooting or whatever. However, there's certain things that we got to be taught not to do. All right, my dad died when I was young, as you know, and my older brother's 10 years older than me, and he just taught me a bunch of stuff. Right, like you go in a restaurant, you go in a nightclub, you go in a bar. You don't sit with your back to the door, stand with your back to the door. You keep your eye on what's going on, because anything could happen at any time. But someone has to teach you that, right?
Yep.
When you see a man, for instance, walking on the inside of a woman on the street, no one taught him different. Right. You see him never opening a door or never helping an old lady. No one taught him different, right? You see him doing things that aren't tactical. No one taught him different. Right. So it's that programming is very important. Like, sure, a lot of the stuff we were taught some stuff in the Marine Corps, but a lot of the stuff I was taught before we even joined the Marine Corps. So right. It's 100% very important. Now, you can always decide to ignore everything your parents ever told you. Right.
That's the 10% we talk about in the Marine Corps. There's always that 10% that just got to color outside the lines.
Always.
Yeah, you're right. But kind of just to put a pin on this, and I want to get your opinion on this also, man. I was just thinking, maybe the reason why we don't spend as much time consciously programming is because maybe it's because we thought that the programming that we were given was wrong. And we figured we want to do something else. Like, I remember growing up, like in my house, you couldn't have no closed doors. You couldn't be in your room and your door just be closed. You know what I'm saying? Because, my mama may have thought you may have been sneaking, or you may have been doing something somewhat nefarious. Now, we was all good kids. There was nothing. But when I became an adult, I couldn't wait to go in the room and close. Hell, I close every daggone door in this house now. You know what I'm saying? All because of that.
No, I get it.
But yeah, man. But I was just
Well, but then
thinking
you adjust the
maybe.
programming. That part, you feel like that wasn't effective parenting, so you don't program your kids that way, right? I
Yeah.
mean, I think the guys like you and Cupid and Mac and my boy Wolf, my boy Adam the Wolf.
Hmm.
What I know about you gentlemen, the people I just named, in fact, let me write that down. What I know about you gentlemen is you don't parent like you were parented, you know. And no knock on your parents, but it's
Right.
like the effectivity that you have is because you've adjusted, what do you call it? You adjusted windage, or you adjusted fire, and you're
Yeah.
like, okay, I don't need I don't need for my ego or for my parenting style, I don't need the doors open, right? I know that if you're a young man or a young woman, there is some time within a 24-hour period where you're just going to want to be in your own space and have some privacy, and now I also know parents who like, oh, you didn't come home, you want to come home 4 hours after curfew, I guess you don't need this door. Or you want to
Right.
slam this door while you're talking to me, I guess you don't need this door.
Don't need the door. I've
You
taken
know
the
what I'm
door off
saying?
a hinge
So
before myself.
that happens, but those were boundaries broken before that happened.
Right.
So I think that it's like you're adjusting, and you're like, you know what, I had these restrictions on me, but I don't require that, right? I was so
Mhm.
present, you know, with any luck, everybody, every child lives a significantly better life than their parents and their grandparents, right?
At
Um,
least that's the hope.
that's the hope, but that also takes effort, right? So um, there are some people who their parents were raised by grandparents who literally punched them in the face, right? And so your
Sheesh.
parents think that beating you was less, less be, that was being soft on you compared to their parents. And
Right.
you're
Oh yeah,
like,
yeah.
I'm not doing that, right? Like, like I took your door off when you slammed it,
Mhm.
as a consequence to you. But my grandfather would have put you through the wall. He might have
Yep.
hospitalized if you slammed. He wasn't taking you slamming a door. There wasn't going to be a discussion. There were going to be
Corporal punishment
problems.
was the first reflex. That wasn't something that came later. That was your first reaction. I'm gonna
Right.
bust him up.
So, from what we now know, and also like this is why the internet is for more than just looking at attractive people of the opposite sex, or looking at luxury items, or looking at whatever, right? um,
Mhm.
because we all have access to libraries, we have access to research, real research, not just research that agrees with what we already think, right? um,
Yeah.
and when we do that, we're like, okay, this is not effective, right?
Mhm.
Brutalizing someone to get your point across is not effective, especially when they're a child, right?
Yeah.
So um, it's just one of those things, right?
Yeah.
And that's not to say that if when we were kids, if we were really messing up, a spanking or something didn't straighten something out, um, you know. But the more you grow, the more you know, the more there's different ways to skin a cat. Like, I think children nowadays, it's almost like throwing them in shark infested waters, having them, not taking a tablet or something is, uh, you know, detrimental. cutting
Yeah.
off the Wi-Fi, you know. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think the programming is important, and it's up to you to figure out the different levels of programming. And also, when you see someone, like I've known people who had children young, and then 10 or even 20 years later had children in a second marriage or whatever, and then the style is so much different because, like you alluded to earlier, you know so much more, right?
Right.
You know, becoming a parent at 25 is different than becoming a parent at 40 because you know so much more, and you're probably, you're more patient. You have resources. Like
Hmm.
when people, and I think it's been trending older now in this country, but when people have a child later, they're like, yeah, I can pay for swim practice and private school and piano lessons and everything, no sweat, because I'm at that point in my career, or I'm that point in life,
Yeah.
and
Hence the reason why people are choosing to have children later. You know, people are
yeah,
choosing to have children later because they're further along in their careers. Maybe instead of getting 1 week vacation now, they can get 3 weeks vacation. You know what I'm saying? Which allows them more time or whatnot. But speaking of parents, one last thing on parenting, man. I think a lot of times the programming isn't happening in a positive way. It's because we haven't first learned to program ourselves in a positive way. You know, we spend so
sure,
much time reacting, trying to ensure that we're getting kids food to eat, clothes, shelter, and finding ways to occupy their time that we really don't think about the other aspect other than provision, which is teaching. And I think a lot of times we just totally forget that until we realize that ultimately it's like, man, dang, I totally forgot about I got to teach this person too. You know,
hmm
but that's society is making it like that now. Like now you gotta. It used to be that the father could work and you could live off one salary now. Whereas now you might have to have two, which means mom's not going to be there as much, which means those moments that could be had are not being had. Like I remember growing up because my mom didn't work. When I came in the house, my mom had dinner, and I got home before 3 o'clock, and
hmm
my mom had dinner ready so that we could eat and have the nutrition in it so that we could perform better in our doing our homework.
right,
And I took it totally for granted, and I hated it at the time because I was used to eating. I wanted to eat dinner when people typically ate dinner, which was 6:30, 7 o'clock, or whatnot. But if I found it to be extremely profound that I performed better because I may have eaten lunch at 11 o'clock in the morning and may not
right,
eat again until I get home, you know? And I realized that once I had some food in me, I performed better. You know what I'm saying? So I
yeah, of
think
course.
my point is that I think that it's hard to train your children for success when you're not aspiring to success yourself. You know what I'm saying? I think we have to always
And when you're
constantly
not
remind
there,
ourselves. Yeah, we have to remind ourselves that we are a living example for what we want our children to be. And we really, yeah, I may work a terrible job and then come home and want to sit down and watch TV. But guess what? Little Jody's looking at me. You know what I'm saying? And what
mhm,
Jody should be seeing is me coming home after a hard day's work and maybe getting on and maybe trying to take you know, a coding course or something else that could,
mm,
make my life better so that they always say parents who read books usually have children that read books. You know what I'm saying? So maybe if I just started
glad you said
researching
that.
things, you know, maybe if I just research some things more, or my kid sees me, maybe heck, we don't even have to read books anymore. Now we can listen to books. Now when they come up to us, what you doing? Oh, I'm listening and reading this book by so and so that talks about this, that, and the third. Maybe they'll start picking it up just because that's what they're used to seeing. But that might have to be another conversation for another day because I
No,
know.
it doesn't. I wrote on one of my index cards as
Uh
I
huh.
prepared as I prepared to meet with you this evening that
Okay.
people need to read. And I said that specifically people need to read books because audio books are cool, but there's something about the process of picking up a physical book. And books aren't really that expensive. And also, my siblings and I grew up going to the Brooklyn Public Library, and
Hmm.
we picked up the books and we read books every day, 7 days a week, right?
Right.
And I think it was profoundly helpful for all of us. But when you pick
Yeah.
up a book and you're interested in something, right? You got a kid, the kid's interested in space travel. The library is full of books on space travel and NASA and whatnot, or you can order some from I won't say the name of any trillion-dollar businesses where you could order books from, but
Hmm.
until they pay your podcast,
Till they pay
um,
us.
pay us. You can order books, and then you're reading the book, and you get your highlighter out, and you highlight these words on this page. You've seen me
Mm.
do that before, like text you
Yeah.
a passage from a book, and it's already got a couple lines highlighted. And if
Yeah.
I've ever done that to you, you can trust that I've read that book 4 or 5 times, and I'm thinking about it, and I'm grabbing the book, and I'm like, Mo, I'm sending you this line in this book. Just happen to have
Right.
a good, nothing like good props, you know. So
Imagine that.
so when you when you're displaying that, and they're like, man, dad's always reading something. Dad knows about things because he's experiencing. You have to have both parts. You're a Marine. You've traveled around the world, and then you're not afraid to get knowledge from other places, from places that are researched and peer reviewed, and somebody has done everything, almost everything in the world that you could think of. Nothing new under the sun, right?
Nothing new under
And
the sun.
so that's a part of it. People need to tap into and access all of the world's knowledge, right? And that way you aren't just stuck in an echo chamber of where you're from, or people being just like you, or even the negativity, because negativity gets more reaction than positivity, right? Like, because things that hurt something like 4 times more than the things that make you feel good. That's why I think maybe we talked about this before, but I remember years ago on Twitter, um, I was reading through a celebrity's Twitter feed, and
Hmm.
99% of it was complimentary, and he didn't reply. But whenever anyone said anything bad about him, you know, he would like give this random person with three followers that, for all you know, is a Russian bot, right? He would give so much time and attention to defending himself and attacking, and I was just like, it just made me think, well, what's wrong with you? Why did that bruise your ego? Why did you find it impossible? And it's a job for all of us, but I think um that's part of what we all need to learn, and what should be taught to children and young adults, because your reaction, not even an overreaction, your natural reaction can get you killed, can get you fired, can get you, can ruin your relationship. So you have to take a beat. You have to utilize some stoicism. You have to say, okay, I don't have to quickly react. Sometimes people are gaslighting you. Sometimes people are insulting you to get a reaction. Sometimes people are trying to goad you or trick you or push you into, getting in some kind of trouble, getting kicked out of school, getting in a fight, getting arrested, right?
Yeah.
So it's this kind of calmness and presence of mind. It's this teaching. It's like, look, someone said something and they're attempting to move me off my square. But I've listened to my mom, I've listened to my dad, and I'm well read, and I'm well traveled, and I'm well studied. And um, you know, as Lord Tywin once said on Game of Thrones,
Yeah.
a lion doesn't concern himself with the opinions of sheep.
You're right.
You know,
And there's one thing that I always think about is that exposure brings about change. The more you expose yourself to, the broader your mind becomes, the more ways you think of dealing with certain situations, because everything isn't cookie cutter. You know what I mean?
exposure brings about change. Amen to that.
Yeah. That was the first thing I thought of.
Bars.
Believe it or not, I thought that up when I was 18. I said, when I left Detroit, and I got a worldview of things, when you touch down in Haifa, Israel, or you touch down in all these other places, you see how people are common, but you see how different we are. And maybe there's something to be learned here. You know what I mean? So exposure brings about changes. And I think what happens is, I think that we as adults, we have to continue to expose ourselves so that we can expose our children to things. You don't have to go to Egypt to know about Egypt. My wife, me and Terry, we went to this Egyptian, there was this holographic Egyptian presentation at this museum, right?
I remember reading about that.
Yeah.
I read about that in Atlanta. They had that.
Yeah, and it was so dope. It was the dopest. It was one of the dopest experiences I ever had. To actually be able to see, Giza and to see these places and to go inside of a pyramid without physically having to be there and learn rituals and how they did things and all of these other things and the reasoning behind all of it, was so that these men who were kings could be transported and become gods. You know what I'm saying? But it taught me so much about the human dynamic. It taught me so much about how we think and the progression of thinking from then up until now that I was blown away, man. As a matter of fact, Cam and Jamila ended up going to it later, and they talked about it the same way. It was such a wonderful experience, man. It was a whole VR tour. That's what it was. It was a VR tour. Yeah. So I was pretty blown away by that. But I want us to continue to, as adults, continue to keep learning, so that we can continue to teach our children how to learn, because you sitting on the couch, chances are you're going to have a young adult that's sitting on the couch. You know what I mean?
Right.
At least that's, kids tend to mimic their parents versus, they never listen to what you say, or they hardly listen to what you say. They mostly listen to what you do, So if we really want to become more effective at parenting, or we want to become, we want to bring a better grade of human, then we have to become better ourselves, or at least be in the pursuit of better, because sometimes effort means everything. You know what I mean? If we can just continue to be in the pursuit of excellence, then it'll be a lot easier for our children to want to have that also. 100. Absolutely, man. Well, look, man, good talk, bro. We have some great talks, man.
Always.
For those of you who have decided to chime in or tune in to this conversation between myself and Brooklyn, I want to say thank you. If you have any feedback, we'd appreciate it if you put it in the comments. We're welcome to all feedback because that's how you grow. And one thing Brooklyn and I will never stop doing is growing. So we appreciate all of you for coming out and taking a look and listening to two fellow Marines just sitting here chopping it up about life and other things. And I just want to say, thanks for tuning into the I4I podcast. I'm Mo Riley. Who am I with?
I'm Brooklyn Taylor.
Yeah, man. And until next time, y'all, appreciate the look. We'll talk to y'all soon.